the best information we have at the time, and that information has evolved. For example, if any administration official, including any career official, were on television on Sunday, September 16th, they would have said what Ambassador Rice said.
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney just moments ago responding to the hearing being held right now by the Republican-controlled House Oversight Committee on what it calls the security failures of Benghazi. Democrats acknowledge the need for this hearing and investigation, but says the investigation is politically motivated. The former head of a recently withdrawn U.S. security team in Libya testified that the State Department ignored warnings that more security was needed.
The security in Benghazi was a struggle and remained a struggle throughout my time there. The situation remained uncertain, and reports from some Libyans indicated it was getting worse. Diplomatic security remained weak. In April, there was only one U.S. diplomatic security agent stationed there.
Joining me now live, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. So, Kelly, obviously a lot of important details, including what the State Department said late yesterday. But first, I want to talk about why Democrats allege that this is politically motivated, at the same time saying that this is a necessary investigation and hearing.
It's part of the tension that can often happen between the two parties on this committee, which does have an important responsibility to check when government actions take place from other agencies, oversight, to try to get to the bottom of some of these things. Now, Democrats say that they did not feel that they were given sufficient notice about what was being gathered by the committee in terms of interviews that were being done. A member of the committee traveled to Libya, but Democrats were not included in that. So there is tension. We've also seen sort of a low-grade quarreling going on between Democrats and Republicans on the committee. At the same time, when everyone steps back, they all agree that because of the loss of life here, the grave security problem that existed in Libya, and were there any of these elements that were foreseeable, were the right steps taken? Those are serious questions that need to be dealt with. One of the problems that we're seeing unfold at this hearing is there still tend to be very stark differences in perceptions and in what the officials are talking about. You heard there from one of the security personnel on the ground saying they had wanted more help. We've also heard from representatives of the State Department saying they believe that the level of security presence was appropriate at the time. Still a lot of question, Tamron, about the notion of the video being a source of this. Now the State Department says it had never said that was the case. A lot of questions coming from members of the panel about why a period of time of roughly 5 to 7 days elapsed from knowing the crisis was unfolding when it was happening and then getting a more clear picture that it was not a part of some spontaneous protest. There are Republicans on the committee who are saying we just don't understand why there is such confusion. The State Department says these were critical events. Members on the ground were trying to save themselves in the early hours, and then there was a lot of chaos in between. So there is no sense of satisfaction, I think, from either side that they've gotten to the bottom of some of these things, but definitely a lot of conversation today that might lead to where new inquiry would go forward. And obviously there are other investigations underway, and that's holding up some of this because some of the key materials, including video that was taken by the U.S. government at the location, is a part of that investigation now. Tamron?
Let me play another excerpt. Utah Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz earlier, some of the comments that he made. Let's play him.
The second bombing was an improvised explosive device that was placed on the north gate, breaching the wall. It was a test by terrorists, and it was successful. And we didn't respond fully and adequately. We didn't acknowledge it. We didn't talk about it. We pretended it didn't happen. It was a terrorist attack on a U.S. asset in Libya, and it was never exposed. We pretended it didn't happen. Well, guess what? The third time the terrorists came to attack us, they were even more successful, killing 4 Americans.
Of course, the congressman referring to 2 previous bombings at that consulate in Benghazi. Kelly, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but it's obviously been brought up, the State Department changing the details right before this hearing. Do we know if that was to get, I guess, its version out before some of the harsher questions are asked, or new information, even down to the lieutenant colonel who said that security was a struggle and remained a struggle throughout his time in Benghazi?
There is still a conflict from those who are on the ground and the officials here. Some of the Republicans on the panel asked if the State Department officials had ever been to Libya. The response was no. And so there is a conflict about what was the appropriate level at the time. The State Department officials say that they believe that they were appropriately staffing security in the country at the time. They also talked about being sort of in real-time communication with the people who were in the consulate at the time this was all happening. And there were phone calls going back and forth between what was happening on the ground in Benghazi to Tripoli, where the U.S. Embassy is headquartered, and here in Washington, where there were officials who were trying to figure out how to get resources to them. That raised part of the question as well. If they were in that kind of moment-by-moment contact, again, how did the issue of a spontaneous protest based on a video come up? Really haven't gotten an answer to that yet. Certainly there are a lot of concerns about the gravity of the situation. You do have people in both parties who are looking at this with a serious mind, but there's also some of the political overtones that are clearly playing out as well.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, thank you very much. Coming up. Reverend Al Sharpton and Reverend Jesse Jackson joined hundreds of protesters outside the Supreme Court as the justices hear arguments on the University of Texas affirmative action plan. Plus, the debate's down ballot effect. I'll talk with the Boston Globe writer who is crediting Scott Brown's new bounce in the poll to Mitt Romney's debate performance. Tonight, Brown and Warren face off in their third debate.